Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive on Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
I think a lot of our listeners have either read it or heard about it
It's been around for a while now.
since '97, right?
Yeah, it's like a classic in the personal finance world.
And for those who haven't read it, well, today's your lucky day.
We're going to break down all the key ideas, the good, the bad, and yeah, maybe even the ugly.
Because let's be real, this book has sparked a ton of debate.
It definitely challenges a lot of conventional wisdom.
And that's what makes it so interesting, right? It
Right.
forces you to think differently about money and success.
So let's dive in. Where do you want to start?
Well, I guess we should probably start with the premise of the book, right? The whole rich dad versus poor dad thing.
Yeah, that's the heart of it, isn't it? Kiyosaki uses this really compelling storytelling approach, contrasting his own father, the poor dad, with his friend's father, the rich dad.
Two very different perspectives on money and life.
Exactly. The poor dad represents the traditional path,
Go to school, get a good job, work hard, and you'll be set.
which, let's be honest, a lot of us were raised with that mindset.
But Kiyosaki argues that this path can actually lead you into a financial trap,
The rat race, he calls it.
stuck in a cycle of working just to make ends meet.
The rich dad, on the other hand, takes a completely different approach.
She focuses on financial literacy,
Yeah, understanding how money works.
building assets, and making money work for you, not the other way around.
That's a big one, isn't it? The idea of not just trading your time for money, but building systems that generate income even when you're not actively working.
It's about creating wealth, not just earning a paycheck.
And that's where the concept of assets versus liabilities comes in, which is so central to Kiyosaki's philosophy.
Okay, so can we unpack that a bit?
Yeah.
What exactly does he mean by assets and liabilities? I think a lot of people get confused by that.
It's actually pretty simple, but it's also kind of mind-blowing because it challenges how most people think about their finances.
So go on, break it down for us.
An asset, according to Kiyosaki, is anything that puts money in your pocket.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Well, it could be a rental property that generates monthly income, a business that brings in profits.
Got it. So it's not just about owning stuff. It's about owning stuff that actually makes you money.
Exactly. A liability, on the other hand, is something that takes money out of your pocket.
Ah, okay. So like your mortgage, your car payments, those kinds of things.
Exactly. Things that cost you money to own and maintain.
Even if they seem like valuable possessions, like a fancy car or a big house.
Right. And that's where Kiyosaki really flips the script.
He argues that a lot of things people consider assets are actually liabilities if they're not generating income.
Like that big house with a huge mortgage that eats up your monthly income.
Or that brand new car that depreciates the moment you drive it off the lot.
So it's not just about what you own, it's about what you own that's actually working for you financially.
It's a total shift in perspective.
And that shift in perspective is what can lead to building real wealth.
Now, I know we've got to talk about the famous cash flow quadrant.
Oh, yes, that's a big one.
Can you explain that in a nutshell for our listeners who might not be familiar with it?
Sure, it's basically a framework for understanding the different ways people generate income.
And it's divided into 4 quadrants, right?
Right. Employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor.
And each quadrant represents a different way of relating to money.
The left side of the quadrant, the employee and the self-employed, they're mostly trading time for money.
So like working a job, whether for someone else or for yourself.
Exactly. And Kiyosaki's argument is that we should aim to move to the right side of the quadrant, to the business owner and investor categories.
Where your income is more passive and less reliant on your direct labor.
Yeah, where your money is working for you.
It's a really interesting concept and gets you thinking about where you fit within that quadrant.
And how you might be able to shift your approach to create more financial freedom.
But let's be real, making that shift is not always easy.
It definitely requires a change in mindset,
And a willingness to step outside your comfort zone.
which is where financial literacy comes in, right?
Kiyosaki stresses this over and over again, the importance of understanding how money works.
If you want to escape the rat race, you need to know the rules of the game.
And be able to make informed financial decisions.
That's how you break free from that cycle of earning and spending without ever really getting ahead.
So it's not just about working hard or even saving money. It's about being smart with your money.
And knowing how to make it grow.
And it's about, as Kiyosaki says, minding your own business.
Which doesn't necessarily mean starting a company, But it does mean taking control of your finances
Understanding investments, being aware of financial opportunities.
and not just blindly following the traditional path.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think there's one more crucial piece of Kiyosaki's philosophy that we need to touch on.
Mindset, right?
Yes. He talks a lot about the importance of overcoming limiting beliefs about money,
Like the idea that wealth is only for the lucky few.
or that you need a ton of money to start investing.
Or even the fear of failure.
He argues that these beliefs can hold you back from achieving financial success
You have to believe in yourself and your ability to create wealth.
and develop a positive relationship with money.
See it as a tool for good, for creating the life you want.
It's not just about the mechanics of finance. It's about your mindset
Your attitude towards money.
and your belief in your own potential.
Now, we've talked a lot about the positive side of Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
The empowering message, the practical advice.
But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, can we?
You're talking about the criticism.
Yeah. This book has definitely attracted its fair share of controversy.
So let's dive into that a little bit.
Like, what are some of the concerns that people have raised about Kiyosaki's approach?
Well, for one, some people question the validity of some of his claims.
Like, are his anecdotes really accurate?
And does his advice actually work in the real world?
For example, John T. Reed, a real estate investor and author, has been pretty vocal in his criticism of Kiyosaki.
He argues that some of his financial advice is just plain wrong.
And that his anecdotes are often oversimplified and don't reflect the complexity of real-world investing.
Then you have critics like Rob Walker from Slate, who argues that Kiyosaki makes a lot of sweeping generalizations about Americans.
And that his portrayal of American culture is kind of lacking in nuance.
So it's important to acknowledge these critiques.
And to approach any financial advice, even from a popular figure like Kiyosaki, with a critical eye.
Definitely. It's all about finding a balance,
Learning from different perspectives.
considering various viewpoints.
And ultimately making informed decisions that align with your own financial goals and values.
And despite the controversy, there's no denying that Rich Dad, Poor Dad has had a massive impact.
I mean, it's sold over 32 million copies worldwide.
It's clearly resonated with a lot of people.
So what do you think is the secret sauce behind its phenomenal success?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors.
It's definitely a very engaging read.
He uses simple language, relatable stories,
And he presents a message that really speaks to people who are looking for an alternative path to financial security.
he challenges the status quo, the traditional way of thinking about money.
And he offers a sense of hope and empowerment.
Like, you can take control of your financial destiny.
You don't have to be stuck in the rat race.
And the book's publishing story is pretty fascinating, too.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Did you know it was initially self-published?
Really? I had no idea.
Kiyosaki couldn't find a traditional publisher who was willing to take a chance on his unconventional ideas.
So he took matters into his own hands.
Exactly. He believed so strongly in his message that he was determined to get it out there.
And he did it through a lot of grassroots marketing, like talk shows and radio appearances.
And it clearly worked.
What a testament to the power of his belief.
Okay, so let's recap for a second.
We've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We talked about the contrasting philosophies of the rich dad and the poor dad,
The importance of distinguishing between assets and liabilities.
the concept of the cash flow quadrant,
The role of financial literacy and mindset.
and we even touched on the criticisms surrounding the book.
Reminding ourselves to approach any financial advice with a critical and discerning mind.
It's all about taking what resonates with you, applying it thoughtfully, and always being open to learning and adapting as you go.
Because ultimately, your financial journey is unique.
And there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where we'll delve deeper into some of the key takeaways and discuss how they can be applied in today's world.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
All right, so we left off talking about some of the criticisms surrounding the book.
Yeah, I think it's important to address those, to have a balanced perspective.
Definitely. But before we get too deep into that,
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the context in which the book was written.
Oh, you mean the fact that it was published way back in 1997?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The world has changed a lot since then, especially when it comes to finances.
Oh, absolutely. The internet, technology, the whole financial landscape is just completely different now.
So do you think some of Kiyosaki's advice is outdated?
Well, it's not so much outdated as maybe needing some adjustments.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Like the core principles he talks about, financial literacy, building assets, thinking like an entrepreneur.
Those are still relevant today,
More than ever, I'd say.
but the specific strategies might need to be adapted.
Exactly. You got to take into account the current market conditions, the new tools and resources that are available.
It's like he provides the foundation,
It's a mindset.
and then you build your own personalized strategy on top of that.
Right. You take the principles and apply them to your own situation.
So it's not a step-by-step guide,
More like a framework for thinking about money
a way to challenge your assumptions,
and to see things from a different perspective.
which is what I think is so powerful about Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It really pushes back against conventional wisdom.
Like, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about money and success,
And it encourages you to explore alternative paths.
instead of just blindly following the crowd.
Yeah, to think for yourself.
And to take control of your financial destiny.
Which can be pretty intimidating for some people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, I'm supposed to think like an entrepreneur.
But what if I have no idea where to even start?
And what if I'm afraid of failing?
Right, those are all valid concerns.
And I think that's where Kiyosaki's emphasis on mindset comes in.
Yeah, he talks a lot about overcoming those limiting beliefs.
Like the fear of failure, the idea that you need a lot of money to start investing,
He wants people to believe in themselves.
and to see money as a tool, not something to be scared of.
And he uses those stories, those anecdotes, to illustrate his points.
Like the one about buying a small condo as an investment property instead of a big house.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example.
It shows how